Let's try this one more time. Can you
Okay,
hear
I
me?
can hear you just fine.
Now I can finally see and hear you. I'm sorry about that. I must have had some.
All right. Well, we're actually live now because I hit the go live button, Doctor Hypnosis. So we're going to do the intro. We're going to be right back, guys. Thank you for joining us. Hey guys, welcome to Executive Espresso. It is so good to have you here. We had a bit of audio difficulty earlier, and today I invite you to tune in to discover some mind hacking secrets for bigger breakthroughs in leadership, innovation, entrepreneurial strategy, and even relationships and just your private life. Today we have one of the most mysterious characters on X, the X platform. At Bowtie Trance is his username. He is also known as Dr. Hypnosis. He's going to be revealing some strategies for you guys for persuasion, creativity, how to influence your own subconscious. You've often heard me say we first engineer our thoughts, then our thoughts engineer our lives. We're going to talk about how to take a deeper dive into that with the author of Feels Like Cheating. He is a master of theta-state creativity, subconscious, programming of yourself, and how to hack your brain for success. And I'm going to get him up here. He is actually, I did say mysterious, so we're just going to show his PFP today, as we say. But Dr. Hypnosis, tell us how you got into this field. And yes, by the way, welcome. Thank you for being on the show today. And just dig in. How did you get into the whole spooky thing of hypnosis and hypnotism?
Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Heath. I really appreciate this. I'm excited to have this conversation. It's actually less mysterious and spooky than people might think. In fact, it's very science-backed. It's very commonsensical. And if you don't like the term trance, if you don't like the term mind programming, well, let's just use the terms like daydreaming. Let's use terms like zoning out. I love that you already built the ramp for us here by saying thoughts, right? Engineer the actions. That's absolutely true. My book, This Feels Like Cheating, takes you a step prior to that and tells you it's actually your feelings that engineer your thoughts. Your emotions, your imagination state fuels how you think about things, and then that influences the action. So if we just back the train up a little bit and talk about how can I engineer my emotions, my feelings, my impulses towards a situation, which is very easy to do. Just call it the world of make believe. And there's actually good scientific evidence for why that does change the way we think about things, and then that changes the way we act in those situations. My background is I went to school for psychology with every intention of becoming a licensed therapist, and I ended up not finishing that program because of some things that have to do with once you become a licensed therapist, there are some regulations, right? You have to keep up with your state regulations and federal regulations, and I found it to be somewhat limiting in that respect. And as I was getting into that anyway, I sort of accidentally tripped into the field of persuasion, influence, and then therefore hypnosis, and said, this is so much more effective and so much more like cut to the heart of things. I would rather do this than, a more traditional form of licensed therapy.
Well, so how long have you been doing this?
Oh, golly. If we want to go all the way back to probably 14 or 15 years, I would say.
What do you? And I usually wait to the end of this, to ask this question because I call it the triple shot, But let me go ahead and kind of get you to spill the beans. So, what's one of the things that surprised you the most about this field? Let me ask that a different way. What's
Mhm.
one of the things that you had wrong early on, and it really, that might have really surprised you that you had wrong that you've now corrected in your mindset?
I would say it's the amount of time that it takes to actually fix a situation. And again, that's part of the limitations, I think, of traditional therapy is that, uh, not to knock the profession or anything, I have good friends that are in that field and they're good at it. And I experienced it myself with one of the therapists that I went to. Uh, but a lot of them want to kind of focus on the past and the problems. And one of the things you'll learn in my book is that we empower wherever we put the focus. So if I spend 20 minutes with you talking about your horrible childhood and all the mistakes you've made and the things you're stuck in right now, going back to the idea that your emotions power the thinking, powers the actions, what I'm doing is I'm actually asking you to evoke all those bad feelings right here, right now, in this current moment. And now it all feels present and real again. What was kind of incredible to me and still is to this day, every time I have a client meeting and kind of go through some situation like that where we want to do trance change work, what's amazing to me is how quickly it works to focus on where do you want to be tomorrow? Not how did you get to this point? Where do you want to be tomorrow? Can we envision that future? Can we play a game of make believe where all you're seeing in your make believe imaginative world is the successes that you want? And suddenly you're thinking differently, you're feeling differently, you're acting differently. It's very fast, and that's very surprising to me. Still to this day, it surprises me.
Oh, it surprises you that it's fast.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And I would agree with that. I think that in my work, there's a bottom up approach and a top down approach. And so, and this is going to get us into talking about theta states. But in the timeline or the timestamps, you guys will see it on YouTube if you go over there. The unfair advantage of theta thinking, and we're going to be peeking behind the curtain of brain reprogramming, and that is that you kind of walk through life with a spotlight of attention. And so, if you're attending on all the hustle and bustle of life, then that takes energy, that takes focus. And so, if you can leverage hypnosis to change the spotlight of your attention, then you can get more work done more quickly. What would you say about that? Would you say that's accurate or on the right track, or you're welcome to
Oh yeah.
disagree?
No, you're absolutely on the right track with that. And like I said before, what we focus on is what we empower. What we focus on is what feels the most important at that moment. And so I will use an example of, let's say I'm working with a client who has an inkling that, maybe I should be an author. I feel like I've got creativity. I feel like I should write a book. What can we do in the world of theta state, which is just another word for hypnotic trance, daydreaming, etc.? What can we do within that space to help me accomplish this goal of becoming an author? And so I'll take you down, relaxed, into this wonderful imaginative state, get you to the point where you're creating a visual environment for yourself. Can you see the trees? Can you hear the birds? Okay, we're fully in the world of, I call make believe. And so now I want you to envision yourself that you're actually sitting at a book signing. Your book is now a bestseller. You're already at the point of signing for customers and they're so happy with you. And they'll say, as you look over on the table at the stack of books that you've written, which is now a bestseller, what title do you see? Well, you don't know the title yet. We haven't gotten that far in real life. But because we're in this wonderful world of make believe, your brain, your subconscious starts creating this. And suddenly the client says, oh my gosh, I see the title of my book. And I'm feeling all of those great feelings of success because I'm visualizing a book signing party where I'm already successful at this. What we've done is we've just bypassed the logic brain and all of its reasons why you shouldn't do this, all the reasons why it might not work, which is what your logic brain is supposed to do. It's supposed to provide risk analysis, and you need that at certain points, but not when we're trying to be creative, when we're trying to imagine solutions, when we're trying to think about, where do I want to end up? And so as we bypass those steps, it's a form of thinking past the sale. And inevitably the client will come up out of that, daydream moment and suddenly go, I have 1,000 ideas of how I'm going to do this because all I did is see the end state and felt all that great feeling that went with that. The feelings change your thinking, the thinking changes the actions.
Well, now let me shock the audience, and Dr. Hypnosis and I, we didn't have a pre-call about this, so a lot of you guys that follow me already, you're realizing that I disagree that feelings cause thinking. But I think that if we talk about this, we'll see that we're saying the same thing, because the way I think it works, and by the way, this is all coming from my field of cognitive behavioral science, is that when we have a thought, I'm sorry, let me back up. When we have a feeling, that you felt so many dozens, hundreds of times before, are connected to different memories in the subconscious. Here's where I think Dr. Hypnosis and I are saying the same thing. And so when you have a feeling of joy, when you have a feeling of pleasure, for that matter, when you have a feeling of anxiety, that automatically gets connected back down to and through different memories in the subconscious. So different events, situations, circumstances. And then based on those events, situations, circumstances, you have thoughts about those events, situations, circumstances. I'll pick just one. Let's just imagine that you actually were speaking to some friends. Maybe there were 3 or 4. And those 3 or 4 friends were hanging on every word that you said. And through your mirror neuron system, you were kind of going back and forth replicating what you think their experience might have been, such as intrigue, curiosity, enjoyment, right? Intrigue, curiosity, and enjoyment. And then you attach to that an emotion such as pleasure or joy, because you're believing that they're enjoying what you're saying. Now let's go back to what Dr. Hypnosis said. So in the future, if you can recreate that event in your mind, whether it's a book on a shelf or people sitting in front of you that are just enraptured by what you're saying, then what you're really doing is telling yourself that this could happen again, and that becomes a target. And once you set that target, that destination, just like you were going to take a trip to Santa Barbara, California, then your brain starts filling in the stepping stones to the success of getting there. So what I believe is really happening, and Dr. Hypnosis, please share what you think about this, and I do think that we're saying the same thing in a different way. When you set a destination, your brain starts filling in the stepping stones. Even if that is an emotion, what your brain is really doing is having thoughts about the emotion. Things happen. We decide what to think about them. Based on how we decide to think about them, we have an emotion, but we often don't realize the thoughts getting us there. And I think that's the power of what you just said. I think that's the power of hypnosis, because when we can get away from the busy, do this, do that, do the other thing of life, and narrow that spotlight on exactly what you just said. You know, I'm setting at a book signing. I think that's a fabulous script, And after this, you can share with folks what a script is, if you use that term, or a hypnosis script. I have a whole book full of those, and the power of those. You're really creating through a script, a story of how you intend things to be, and then your brain starts building stepping stones on how to get there. And so when you visualize the result, your brain comes up with a bridge. I'll say that one more time. When you visualize the result, like Dr. Hypnosis just talked about, when you visualize that result, then your brain begins to build a bridge of how to get there. But be aware that result could be to a lesser state, failure, or it could be to a greater state, success, or it could be to the same state, which is the status quo. But I know that's a lot of information, but let's go back and see if we can come to some agreement on that. What do you think?
I actually didn't hear any point of disagreement in all of that. And I
I was
love
hoping so.
I love your mapping here, your template that you're using, the metaphor of set the destination and let your brain fill in the steps. That's exactly what I'm saying, but maybe through a different metaphor. Is that once you visualize, and I do think the emotion part is important, but
Of
because
course.
I can think about an end state and then worry about it and say, oh, I'm
Yeah.
going to fail when I get there. No, I want to see that thing and I want to feel good about it, which is why I say, hey, visualize the end and also notice how that feels to experience that moment, even though we're projecting it into the future. And so, it's sort of like I will do this. This is touching more on like straight line persuasion, less hypnosis, which I also write about in the book. But it's anchored in the same reality that the emotional control panel, so to speak, in your brain is sort of the trigger, the levers for persuasion, for influence. So I could tell somebody like, hey, uh, I want to go with you to dinner tonight to this new restaurant downtown, and then they start spinning up all of the worries about that, like, oh, the parking is going to be terrible, and I've heard that place has a bad chef, and it's a busy place, we're going to be cramped in, and I've got agoraphobia or wherever. And so if I can start to use the emotional levers for that person, say, yeah, but imagine that it's a wonderful thing. Imagine the food on your plate that you really really love, and imagine that we're just laughing and having a good time. If I can sort of re-engineer your feeling about it, you'll think differently about it. And I know we're talking about some things that are uh, I don't know that we actually have sort of a scientific stopwatch based system to say, yes, the feeling comes first, and then 0.3 seconds later, the thought happens, or they happen in reverse. But it's all sort of working together. So I guess,
Well, I think it's kind of a feedback loop, and I
yes,
think
yep,
people
there you go.
misunderstand what I say sometimes because, I don't mean to say that feelings don't matter. We notice feelings first, they just don't come first. But what does happen is things happen, events, situations, circumstance. This is Aaron Beck. This is cognitive
Hmm.
behavioral psychology in a nutshell. Event, situation, circumstances, A is the antecedent. Most people think that the event, situation, circumstance lead directly to the emotion. We know that's not true because of many reasons. One of which you can confront 1,000 people with the same situation, and they won't have the same feeling. Well, the difference is that what is sandwiched in between is cognition. We don't notice that because in the brain that goes through some very slow state processing, and rightfully so. And I think the power of hypnosis is, yes, you can again start out if you want with a feeling, and I often do that in therapy. I'll recommend people go ahead and notice the feeling, but then ask yourself, where does that come from? What thought process does that come from? And then you'll have a thought about the feeling. And that really, really matters too. And Waylon, yes, way I'll put this on the screen is just so cool. The cognitive sandwich, indeed, Waylon. Yes, I don't know if it got up on the screen. I'll try again. The cognitive sandwich. It can taste so good, very, very tasty. But it really depends on what you do with it. But not to skip ahead because we are about to run out of time. I do try to keep this to 18 to 20 minutes. But why should maybe innovators, entrepreneurs, business leaders, why should they care about this thing called hypnosis? Question number one. And then do you think that it's something that people can get good at in their own lives? What do you think?
100% they can get good at it, and that's why I wrote the book and tackled kind of all the different angles on this, how to actually perform a hypnosis session with somebody else, but then how to put yourself into a state of daydream trance, and envision the future and work with it. And there's scripts in my book, and there's a whole set of chapters on affirmations, which, surprise secret here, that's just another form of hypnosis. But maybe you're not comfortable with the term hypnosis. Okay, let's call it affirmations, and I'll show you how to get there that way. So, can you get good at it? Absolutely. I've wrote about this in the book that when I started doing this on a regular basis, a couple times a week for myself, I noticed that it permanently changed the way I think about things in real time. That I'm much more solution oriented now than I ever was. I used to be a very negative, very see all the problems, analyze the risks kind of a person. I tend to see more solutions first now than I do problems. And so why should you said entrepreneurs and business leaders care about this thing? For that that category of people will probably really appreciate more of the persuasion stuff that I talk about in the book, which again is anchored in the same exact principles. the ability to sort of waking hypnosis, right, with somebody through different linguistic patterns. But as an entrepreneur myself, to be able to go into that theta state and engineer the world of make believe that lets me see the successes that I want, and I'm kind of bypassing the critical thinking for a moment. That's where all the solutions live. That's where all the answers to the problems are. They're there. They just need to be accessed. I talk about how it's you've probably seen the charts that the EEG outputs, right? The different hertz cycles, that theta is like between 4 and 8 hertz. And that layer of brain state sits right above the delta state, which is asleep and dreaming, actual dreaming state. So don't you think it's funny that when we talk about, the future and what you want to do, we say, the dreams that you have, I want to accomplish my dreams. It's like, you don't know how right you are. You were right above the dream state when you're talking about going to the theta. It's a half dream, half conscious place. It's accurate.
And why do you think there's so much power in leveraging that particular frequency oscillation?
So, like I said earlier, I think that as we get into higher levels, like into the beta or gamma states, where we're more active with the logic brain, I call it, the cortex, right? You're dealing much more with analytics. There's a part of that brain system that it's meant to help you analyze risks. It's meant to help you kind of look at, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? We don't want to engage that part of the brain at this stage of the creativity. All I want to do is see all the possibilities. Later, we can engage, the more logic brain and do some risk analysis, or fill in the steps, as you said. Set the destination. Destination setting happens in theta state. Fill in the blanks happens up in beta state, but I want that to come afterwards, not to limit my creativity and my possibility state.
That's exactly right, because I'm sitting in my office right over there. I'll see if I can show you guys. I don't want to make anybody dizzy. But right over there it is. You can see my mic, but that thing with the little comforter on it is my own hypnotherapy chair. So here's what I'll notice in real life when I have a patient come in. They may be shaking. I've seen patients take a seat and literally you can see their hands trembling, their knees are bouncing. And then I'll do some Milton Erickson type techniques where, as you hear the sound of my voice, and then just like Dr. Hypnosis did, I'll paint a picture. A really strange thing happens when the person gets out of that huge radar. My hands are wide. You can't see them. Out of that huge radar of doo-doo brain, do this, do that, do the other thing. I got to walk the dog, I got to feed the kids, I got to buy groceries, I got to wash the car, I've got to do my taxes. Once you get out of that doo-doo brain through somebody leading you through that, and by the way, eventually that someone could be yourself, because I also am a big believer in leveraging self-hypnosis. It is a skill not unlike golf or even putt-putt golf. Then what I'll do is I notice taking the person through what we call the induction. Do you use this term, Dr. Hypnosis, induction?
Yep, for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah, so the induction phase is actually taking the person on a journey. Then I'll notice their hands stop quivering. I notice they start breathing deeper because their brain is doing something different. And so let's leave our guests with today. And by the way, guys, we're here for another couple minutes. If you have a question for myself or Dr. Hypnosis, please put it in the chat. I'll pull it on the screen here, just like I did for Dro, the sound guy. Dro did a wonderful live stream last night. You guys take a look at what he's doing. I posted that in the Exposium, making better spaces, better places on X. It's good to see Automation here this morning. Always great to see you, Automation. And of course, Waylon the farmer does some amazing live streams. And he was talking about the cognitive sandwich. I love that. And so let's leave them with, what's a good way to get started? I mean, it sounds very complicated, I know, to most people. As you well said, it's not as complicated as you might think. But give us just a few simple steps to whet their appetite and maybe get them started.
Yeah, and like I said, it's kind of the maps that we use, the way that we relate to the world, and so maybe the word hypnosis bothers you, or trance bothers you, or brain programming is like, whoa, what are we talking about here? And so if that bothers you, then I'll say, have you ever meditated before? Oh yeah, I understand meditation. Did you know it's the same exact techniques? Slow the breathing, relax the muscles. The only thing we're doing here is intentionally adding some imagination to the meditation as opposed to like, oh, clear your mind. No, no, I want you to actually fill your mind with, you talked about creating a story with them. I like that metaphor too. In my hypnosis sessions, you and I are going to write a story together. You're going to fill in some of the narrative. I'm going to help guide you to some of that, but you're ultimately going to create this make believe world. Anybody can go into make believe. Anybody can meditate. Anybody can daydream. So all I'm doing is saying, let's be purposeful, intentional. Let's go in there with an idea and just see what the brain is, what your subconscious is holding for you. So that's what I talk about in the book. Some induction techniques, yes. Some different environmental metaphors: the beach, the forest, the elevator into the room, like looks a lot like your office, actually, the one that I like to create. Books and chairs and fireplaces and fun things like that. So yeah, it's super easy to do. Sometimes we just need to remove the obstacles of labels that I don't like.
Yeah, yeah, and as you're saying that, a quote from the Matrix comes to mind, where they're
Mm-mm.
talking about whether you can die in the Matrix or not. By the way, you're not going to die in hypnosis. The gentleman that taught me hypnosis would say, and I'm not recommending to do this, but when people get advanced, he said that he could actually leave them in their trance and leave the office and go get a
Mhm.
cup of coffee and come back. If someone never came back, like if he fell down the stairs and broke his neck on the way back to your hypnosis session, you'd eventually just come out of it. You're not going to be stuck in hypnosis and be in that kind of state for the rest of your life. It's you're in a state of hypnosis, I would say like 98.6% of the time. Are you wearing shoes or underwear right now, guys? Just think about that. Now, in the moment it took you to leave us, Dr. Hypnosis and I, do a check of whether you're wearing shoes or underwear. Hopefully, if you're in public, you're wearing both. Then that technically is hypnosis. It's a change in brain state, and that brain state can be anchored. But what Morpheus said in the Matrix is the brain makes it real. Here's the power of
Yes.
that. When you use intention plus strategy with hypnosis, eventually your brain makes these stepping stones real because you've given it a construction project. So, hypnosis is a bit of a construction project, which is why one of the things that I do after I've gotten folks through the basics of learning these hypnotherapeutic strategies is I'll have them write their own script and they'll
Hmm.
bring it to me and I will record it because like Milton Erickson, I'll say things like my voice will go with you because they pattern onto my voice and they get work done because they're acclimated to my voice and they've attributed safety to my voice and that gets them out of their negativity bias mindset. Negativity bias mindset's not a bad thing, keeps you safe, but it's two different brain states. So we did have a question here. Whitey the Farmer says, is highway hypnosis a real type of hypnosis, Dr. Hypnosis?
In fact, it's so real. It's one of the comparisons that I'll make. If you have trouble with the whole concept of hypnosis and trance, and I will say, look, you actually your brain goes into this state multiple times a day anyway. Have you ever heard the term shower thoughts? What? Yeah, we have our best ideas in the shower. Why? Because you are in that relaxed environment and you're on autopilot. You're not having to engage logic brain a whole lot, and so you naturally go into that sort of theta state and have really cool ideas and thoughts. Yes, highway hypnosis is another one of those things. If I'm driving to work, I've got 30 miles, I know the exact route, I don't have to really engage the conscious brain to remember where to turn and that kind of thing. Yes, you will slip into that sort of theta relaxed state, and suddenly you're like, how did it only take me 5 minutes to get to work? Because that's something that happens in theta. You sort of lose time compression happens, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's very real.
And Conrad, my dear friend Conrad, a frequent guest on my Money Mindset Mojo, said the same things. We enter those states so many times every day. You really do it every time you retrieve a memory, every time you retrieve a process. I'd like for you guys to think right now, how do you tie your shoes? You're going to have to technically go into a state of hypnosis to retrieve that process-based memory. And everything in the brain really is a memory. Here's a memory. Ambulation, we call it walking. In order to walk, you have to have a memory of the procedure of walking, but it has been so subliminated into the subconscious, you really don't have to think about it. Waylon says that they talked about people, let me get that up here, people in boxes last night. We talked about sleep and insomnia on people in the boxes last night. Waylon, I didn't know you're putting people in boxes, man. That just sounds like false imprisonment, brother. You're going to get in trouble for that. I'm joking. Can you use hypnosis to help us sleep, Dr. Hypnosis?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the brain states that we go into, a delta is right below theta. So if you can get yourself into that relaxed theta state, that sort of pseudo daydream space, I often find for myself when I'm doing it to myself, it's hard not to slip into delta and just fall asleep. So I don't recommend that you try to get into theta when you are driving, even though highway hypnosis is real. I wouldn't try and use like an induction tape or anything on the road. You might
Yes.
slip into delta and fall asleep. But yeah, in fact, I recommend it. I think it's a wonderful way to wind down your day. It's a wonderful way to what I call seed your dreaming state. When you do fall asleep, the things that you're meditating on as you go into it will probably fuel what you dream about. And don't be surprised if you come up out of that in the morning, come back through the theta state as you're waking up, and suddenly some idea pops in your head and you're like, oh my goodness, I got it. I've got it. There it is.
And let me get. I should have given this warning right up front. Yes, guys, please don't listen to hypnosis tapes, induction tapes while you're driving or operating heavy machinery or working with power tools. Because it's a different brain state. You're asking your brain to do something different than pay attention to the world out here. You're paying attention to the much greater, wider universe inside the vault of your skull. But that comes at the expense of things out here. Conrad says, whilst watching an engrossing movie, yes, daydreaming. And yes, I greatly enjoy that. I do self-hypnosis every night at bedtime and have done for many years. I do sleep induction hypnosis audios and tapes. If you want one of those, DM me. I'll be glad to send you one. The difference in it, and I'll take you through that just really quick, guys. There may be folks interested, is I'll begin with eye fixation. Some of you that know EMDR are thinking EMDR, essentially, even though you're moving your eyes, that's eye fixation. Why? Because you're fixed on a point. Essentially, EMDR is hypnosis. That's what that is. It comes from the work of Bandler and Grinder, and somebody that worked for them leveraged a technique that they talked about and then trademarked it, called it EMDR. It's very marketable. That's hypnosis. And so eye fixation, then there's the induction, and then there's a deepening technique I call descending levels. Dr. Hypnosis mentioned it. You can use an elevator, a staircase, or a gently sloping hillside. And then we go to the most relaxing place, which we anchor. And I'm literally doing my anchor on camera, which is my thumb and forefinger. Even when I do that, those memories that are attached to this physical sensation begin to light up in my brain. And I just want to continue that sequence. The only difference at the end of a script, which is for sleep, is there's no wake up. I do a standard wake up at the end where the person comes back to the present moment. One of the most interesting things I've ever done, and let's see what Conrad says here. As within, so without. Yeah. We first create a reality from within. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Hypnosis, how can they get in touch with you and the content that you produce out there in social media and elsewhere?
So the fastest way to do it is just through X at Bowtied Trance, and I've got pinned posts there that will get you to my locals site, where it's a subscription-based site where I'm training people that want to learn more about this. And then there's also the book that I just published a few weeks back called This Feels Like Cheating. That is available on lulu.com. Just search for This Feels Like Cheating, and there will be both a paperback and a digital version of that. But if you want to connect with me, as again, X is probably the best place. You can book a session with me through that. We can just chat. We can do whatever. So, and thank you so much, Dr. Heath. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you too. One of my favorite things to talk about. So we didn't even scratch the surface. Really didn't even scratch the surface. I have so many questions. But guys, remember, as a leader, as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, those leaders who control their internal world control their outer success. So master what's in here and you'll master what's out there. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I welcome you over to Mindset Masterclass. That is at school.com/mindset, SKOOL.com/mindset. We take a deeper dive into topics just like this. Go out there, master your mind. Have a great day. We'll catch you on Monday morning at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, Memphis, Tennessee time, for another long-form episode. We're there for about 90 minutes usually for Monday Mindset Mojo, and we'll be right back here next Friday for Executive Espresso. Dr. Hypnosis, great work, great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.